Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again, another weekend show with Mr. Stephen Dickson. And I do apologise for my attire. So, Stephen, I'm sorry to say this now, but I've literally come from doing a little bit of work on the bar. So I'm sorry, I'm all vested up, not as professional as I would like to be, but as this is a weekend relaxing show, I'm sure nobody will mind.
Chris, lovely to be here again, and I'm sure that our viewers and listeners will forgive you for your sartorial choices, as they have seen many a sartorial faux pas, or some may claim foible in the time that we've been doing this show. Some have been mine, some have been yours. But the man of many wardrobes, Christopher Notter, we're just pleased to have you here with us, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah, but like I said, my wife will go mad if she walks in and sees me with a vest on. But I literally had to rush in, and I didn't want to be late for you. Stevie, now, obviously, I'm still in Spain, and I'm coming back to the UK tomorrow. But seems to be a little bit. I've termed it now crazy season. So many things now are hitting everybody, and whatever you look at, you look from the shipping, you look at all the backlogs, you look at people now panicking about what's going to be available for Christmas, whether they're going to be able to get electronics. You look at iPhone, with restricted numbers of phones. Everywhere's talking about it. Now, that's from shipping. So we're going to get similar problems in cargo and on the passenger side, especially now as everybody's trying to get their they're trying to cast their net to catch as much as they possibly can. Now, it comes at a price, Steve. It comes at a price. And already now we're starting to see issues surfacing. We're starting to see service problems. We're starting to see backlogs. We're starting to see problems with clearance of cargo. It's going to be the trend now for the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, unless people start to address those issues that have been discussed and expected for a long time. They've got to start working on them now, because you cannot just turn from limited activity to major activity and think that everything is going to run smoothly. It just won't.
Yeah, look, I'm not quite sure how crazy it will get. I mean, that's an interesting choice of words, Chris. I guess, suggesting something is crazy is suggesting people are sort of, out of control, or things are a little bit unexpected. Some jazz hands, around the patch. I don't think necessarily it's all of those things. I don't think, I think there is certainly an element of, people being caught out by, on a positive basis, or positively, we have seen capacity being restored to markets much quicker than expected. I mean, there were the doom and gloom sort of forecasts that wouldn't see, air travel being restored 2022, 2023, 2024, the long game. I think that largely is not the case now, Chris. I think we've seen some really good numbers published this week by Eurocontrol, suggesting I think we're back up around 79% of 2019 air traffic in last week. I think the UK now is back up around the 60% mark of 2019 numbers. So the UK still remains a little bit slow out of the marks and off the blocks in terms of its recovery. But all things told, things are heading in the positive direction from an air travel perspective. However, I suspect, Chris, there's this perfect storm now sort of brewing, or has in some parts already. The thunder has emitted itself from said cumulonimbus cloud, and what the resultant effect of that is, because of the recovery, because of capacity being restored, because schedules are coming back thicker and faster than people would have planned for. I think this issue with talent, Chris, and talent flight, and training availability, training capacity, bringing people back online. I was having a conversation with a regulator yesterday, a European regulator, and they were, very, positive in terms of the way that the airlines and service providers had dealt with the restart. in terms of the regulated training, in terms of keeping flight crew and cabin crew current and bringing them back to line and bringing aircraft back online and, air traffic controllers, etc. There were still some degrees of concern, however, I think when they spoke about those that have moved careers in aviation and haven't returned, even though the jobs have now returned. Examples of, and he was given examples of pilots, for example, that have gone to work in completely different industries, actually, maybe become carpenters or plumbers or dare I say, move from the right-hand seat of an Airbus 320 to the right-hand seat of an articulated lorry, probably being paid more on the continent now than they ever were before. And they've said, actually, to hell with that flying game, to hell with that aviation lark and all that nonsense. There's far more stability here for me and my family, and from an income perspective. I know what my job is. I know what's expected of me. I'm going to stay put here. That is a real concern, I suspect, not only to regulators, but also to airlines and the service providers that have lost people. So we need to really work out how to bring people back. Bringing people back and building back better is about ensuring, I guess, that we've got the right compensation packages in place, Chris. That will have to be spearheaded, if it's not already been, with conversation between the customer and the service provider. The days of handlers living on 2 or 3 or 4% margins, I think are gone.
Yeah.
I think there has to be some money in the bank for a relay. And we've seen that those airports that have had access to capital, those large airlines that have had access to capital, are the ones now that are prospering. What about the regional operators? What about the smaller airports that feed the bigger airports and the hubs? They've not had the same access to capital liquidity. So it's only right and proper, I think, that there's a level of reset at a commercial level between the users and the providers.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be driven. That will drive probably wages up. No bad thing, as long as it's done, sustainably, and that unions don't use this once again as a weapon that can attack their employers. So that's that, I guess, is the second point. The third piece, I guess, is just there could well have been all sorts of plans that have eventuated or designed to support or to deal with the recovery. I guess it's about being airports, airlines, ground handlers, cargo operators, whatever. It's about them being in lockstep, doing this together, sharing more information, being more transparent, talking a little bit about the recovery, not throwing in 10 extra flights next week to an airport without having a conversation with the ground handler first. Or how would they plan for that? What was the plan? Throw 4 aircraft on top of the other, for example, Chris. There's got to be a much more cohesive, joined up approach, in my view, coordinated collaboration that gives consistent contract outcomes.
Yeah.
For the consumer at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's where the focus needs to be, Steve. I think one of the problems is, and you know this as well, is when you're faced with certain problems, you've got so many people who get involved because they've got to protect their own focus, their own budgets, their own targets, their own objectives. And sometimes that causes unnecessary pressure on the operations. So I think now's the time to stand back, be brave, and set a new code of practice and get everybody to buy into it, and be very strict with those triggers as they come in, because most people are not going to be able to cope with this. We've spoken about this for a long time. So you've got to cut back a little bit. The issue of the supply chain sharing data and coming together, that's also very important, and they've got to be realistic. But also, and you mentioned about unions, this isn't now the time just to say things aren't working, so we've got to raise salaries. What now needs to be done is people need to realise that they've also got a responsibility to themselves and their families, their own ecosystem, to enhance their skills base so that they can be flexible and of a higher value. And I think the areas where they've got multi-skilled or cross-skilled capability, that's the way forward, because then you can actually enhance people's remuneration on the efficiencies and the productivity that you get as a result of the outcome. So it's the old adage, doing more with less.
Absolutely. I completely agree, Chris. I think this is a well-trodden path for many people. The trick is that that there's no harm, in businesses or business units or station managers or planning managers, whatever, sticking their hand up and saying, look, for me to deliver an effective outcome to our customers, whether they're shippers or whether they're direct consumers or their airline customers, we need more data. We need more transparency.
Yep.
We need better access to your forecasts and your plans. And I think the we had this before, Chris, where we were saying about airlines in the early days of the crisis had to be very open with their people about the extent of the P&L issues.
Yep.
The more that they kept things guarded and I'm not sharing that with you, the more animosity that created, but the less informed the unions were about the extent of the problems. I suspect that the airlines, the shippers, the forwarders, all of these parts of our business, Chris, that need to be knitted well together to make the whole thing work. I suspect that that there's still this level of concern or distrust about being too open with data. We're not asking for the codes to the nuclear weapons, but what we're asking for is enough data and enough of your plan for us to plan in our business. And I think that really is critical and has to be part of you call it a code of conduct or code of practice. I would say it has to actually be, part of the contractual obligations informing the partnership between the provider and the customer airline or the customer in whichever way. Yeah.
And certain things that, people on the ground are aware of, that they don't often get the chance to voice their opinions. And if they do, they're worried that it would be seen as negative or that they'd be put down or whatever. And that's a culture that's got to change as well now, because, some of these floor activities have a major knock-on effect if it's not addressed properly. Yep. And also, certain things with regulators and authorities, one such thing, which I know this is a cargo focus point I'm going to bring up here now, but it's always been a problem with part shipments. You send part shipments, you've got customs problems. So you end up then having to store it because it won't get cleared and it eats into capacity. So you've got all these things, whereas it'd be much easier to say, no, if it's not a full shipment, it doesn't go.
Yeah.
You've got that. Also closing up certain flights that are coming in waves when it's it's just physically too busy to do things. You don't have to say there's an embargo. You just close the flight because it's operationally required. So you're not creating a panic or you're not creating a problem for the customers. You're just doing it in a certain way. And then where most areas are having problems now is with the clearance and customers coming to pick it up. And that's knocked on for everybody because they've all got the same problems with staff, with equipment, etc. So everyone's got to now work together. I agree with you. They've got to say, look, we've got to make this work, because if this next couple of months and this Christmas period isn't done as well as it could be, there's going to be problems, but it needs to be done as well as it possibly could be. There's going to be a long fallout afterwards.
Well, we are blessed to live in God's country, in the British Isles, with lots of produce on our doorstep, Chris. Lots of fabulous seafood, lots of wonderful spuds in the ground, vegetables growing in the ground, greenhouses full of fruit. We'll be absolutely fine. Buy local, you'll be right.
Yeah, no. I think that's onshoring and buying local is one thing, but even in the UK, Steve, you look at some of the produce now, even meats. They've got a shortage of people. They've got a shortage of capability. They've got a shortage of transportation. So even though it's there and it's available, it's not able to get to the shelves and to where
I know your local farm shop, Chris. I know that there's no shortage of butchers or meats on your farm shop door. I know that.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of everybody else, mate.
You're selfless.
As always. No, but seriously, this is the time now for people to really start to focus on risk, worst case scenarios, and be open about it. And sometimes it's better to step back, control what you've got rather than taking too much and letting it get out of control.
Yeah, indeed.
Touch wood. Let's hope that works. Now, one of the things what you mentioned there again, and it comes back again to training. The type of training has got to change because people don't have the time now to spend on it. So it's got to be very, very effective, and it's got to be things that are affecting cash flow, customer impact issues, and obviously the safety and security side of it. Now, you said you were talking to authorities, Steve. They must be thinking if there's a soak away of so much experience, and then you've got all this extra pressure. So you've got extra flights, you've got extra activity, you've got time pressures, you've got backlogs, you've got all of that. If you underline that and divide that by the additional pressures, you've got safety risk, you've got so many risks there that from an oversight perspective, they must be worried about what's happening and what's potentially going to happen.
Actually, I don't believe that is true, certainly from the conversation I had yesterday, Chris. I think there is I have to obviously be cautious in how I present this, but you see, I can be restrained, Chris. When it's necessary. It's just not very necessary. It's not necessary very often. No, look, the conversation was actually less about safety. I'll tell you why. If you think about what a regulator's purpose is, what is the modus operandi from an industry perspective? It's to ensure that those that are being regulated, let's take airlines or airports, for example, have a set of systems in place to mitigate risk, to manage compliance with policy, and to ensure that the delivery arm delivers to the policy and standards and the expected high level and national level policy outcomes. That, I guess, is in a nutshell what from a safety perspective there is there. So it's a governance role, right? Essentially, it's a governance role. And as we know, in some parts of the world, Chris, regulators are very hands-on, and in some other parts of the world, they're very hands-off. Now, there's no right or wrong way, by the way, in my view. I mean, horses for courses. When I'm in the developing world in less mature environments, I would much rather have a more hands-on regulator who takes a little bit more care and attention, and it might sort of be seen to slow things down a little. But slowing things down a little in the safety sense is no bad thing. Nobody can ever be questioned for doing things too slowly when it relates to delivering safe outcomes. In other parts of the world where we have robust, mature safety systems in place with mature operators, it's very much light touch regulation that applies. And light touch regulation means rather than the regulator really look at every detail and approve every policy change or every manual change, every document change, what they will audit against is your compliance with your standards and your safety management system and your SEMS, for example, your QMS, etc. That is the sort of the two ends, and probably there's some stuff in between, right? However, all of this is done, all of the regulation is in place. We think for safety, actually regulation is in place for the consumer. That's why regulation, whether it's safety regulation or it's economic regulation. So I think there is a view that's widely held by operators and by the regulators that actually safety is what we do. Safety is our MO. That's what we do. What is the impact, however, of the demise of a ground handler because of poor economic outcomes, i.e., below cost handling, etc., or below squeezing under pressure? Well, they will, however, start to reduce some engagement standards or manpower to manage that out. But the impact actually, Chris, then is on the consumer at the end of the day, because it's the airline then is left with less choice for handlers. It's the contractor handler then probably a higher price, or in a monopoly situation, heaven forbid. So I think what we kind of forget is safety is what we do day in, day out, every single day. Yes, there are additional risks introduced by people not flying for a period of time, or aircraft not being turned, or air traffic controllers not being on the line for a period of time. But we've got procedure around that. We've got policy around that. We understand how to manage that. So I'm not disputing the fact there are additional risks in place that need to be managed, but those systems are in place. It's the fallout from it if an airline goes down or a regional operator goes down or there's no PSO operating. Those are kind of the risks I think that largely we have excluded from this inclusive regulatory discussion that we've been having, or the industry has been having for 18 months about how to prevent risk. So because it's the public and the consumer and the taxpayer who in some environments pay for the regulators, others are self-funding through operators and users, that will be damaged by any fault in the system. And that I think is what regulators are trying to protect against.
Yeah, and they got a tough task, and also I think a task that the airports themselves, you know, I keep saying this and probably saying it, and people are fed up with it, but the airports themselves, they can influence an awful lot now moving forward in this industry, you know, with their own customer service charter or their own standards charter or whatever, making sure every single party that's a tenant on their facility lives up to something that the airport wants.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, is more regulation the answer?
No.
You know, people seem to think, oh, let's regulate. Regulation isn't always the answer. Actually, you know, free markets with light touch regulation, you know, creates more consumer choice, creates more competition in the market. Whereas if you make the barriers to entry so great that you can't, you know, actually it's not worth the bloody hassle. Some people would say, you know, so well, you know, if I'm not making 20% margin in my business, I ain't doing it. What's the point?
Yeah.
It's a complete and utter waste of time. Now airlines, you know, have typically operated, certainly low-cost carriers in Europe, you know, between 12% margins good at an operating a net level, but you know, low margin activity, high capital costs, and low margins. And they say, well, actually, why would I do it? Actually, if you're a shareholder, I'll put my money somewhere else. Yeah,
no, exactly, Steve. But I think this is also now the time to have a look at transparency across that and just realise what's a survival level or threshold, and what's a beneficial one for the industry. And some of the numbers that have been going on prior to COVID, so it's not just because of COVID, were just ridiculous. Did not make sense at all.
Yeah.
And to be buying business like that. Right, Steve, let's go. I was going to say let's go on to something a bit more uplifting, but it's not actually. I was just going to say Alitalia last flight. So after
that's very uplifting. They lasted 73 years longer than they should have done.
Well, okay, right. No comment from my side there, but
that's highly unusual, Chris.
Yeah. No.
If you let me ask you a question then. If you were an Italian taxpayer, how would you feel about Alitalia?
How would I feel? That would be without any wine or any lively discussion. I would be
no vino, no piadina.
Yeah, I'd be as mad.
No. There's no such thing as La Dolce Vita when it comes to Alitalia.
Yeah,
let me assure you.
No, Steve, I'd be as mad as hell. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and it's just such a shame that for so many efforts and so many people trying, and so many organisations thinking that they could step in and change things, that it didn't happen. And when you think about it now, you've got ITA. It's a much slimmed down airline, and it's going to have a quarter of the 10,000 Alitalia staff employees that were there before. And now they're still staging protests and strikes. I just don't understand from a logical perspective what they're thinking as well, because at the end of the day, it's like this sustainability argument. Everybody's saying you've got to do this, you've got to do that, but if you're not making money and profit, there's very little to invest in making everything sustainable.
Well, look, I mean, as I said, Alitalia existed probably 73 longer than it ought to have done. Maybe that's rather unfair, but certainly they've existed 20 years since I've been in the industry. They've existed 20 years more than they ought to have been, right? That's a dead set. It's been good money after bad that the Italian taxpayer, every colour of the Italian government, socialist, populist, liberal, conservative, in Italy you could have four of those governments in 1 year, by the way, which I think is part of the problem, Chris. La Dolce Vita is funded by those in Italy that are that are of working age and working population. You know that Italy's got a very high elderly population. Probably nice to retire there. I suspect I might consider that. My wife loves Italy. Ramani, if you're listening, but let's get off to Garda or Sorrento. But not for another 30 years, sweetheart. So just hold your horses. So look, I think as a taxpayer, I'd be very happy that Alitalia has disappeared on the basis that ITA was not exactly just a shame. Is this the sheep that changes its clothes, or is this the what's it? Not the sheep that changes clothes. You know, is it a sheep in a different
Wolf's clothes?
Wolf's clothes? Yeah. I mean, I'm not really sure, Chris, that we can say that ITA will not drain the taxpayer. You know that Etihad
they're already pumping 1.35 billion euros into it from the government funding.
Well, the only rationale around that was to ensure they secured the funding, because they were denied additional funding into Alitalia.
Yeah.
And they expected they wanted, you know, all of the slots and all of the rights to grandfather across to ITA, which is just a nonsense, really. So I've got no real love for Alitalia. Doesn't do much for me, but then I'm not Italian. But I suspect that my conservative liberal friends in Italy would have no love lost for Alitalia either, given that it's them on the right of centre who are the ones that create wealth, and the wealth creators that are funding this bloody useless airline.
Yep, agreed. Now, this might be uplifting, this might be not so uplifting, but a curious and a little smile came, a curious article, but it also brought a smile to my face with regards to brightening up one's day and also customer service.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm talking about is there was a female who stripped off and wandered naked through the airport, and whilst on those tours was asking everybody how they were, where were they from, etc. So I'm pretty sure it wasn't part of Denver International Airport's get to know the customers better. But my goodness me, how would you feel? Do you know what I'm saying? You got your mask on, you're all ready to go, and then all of a sudden somebody pops out and asks, how are you and where are you from?
What, naked?
Yeah.
Well, slightly lost for words, Chris. It hasn't happened.
That doesn't happen often, son.
It hasn't happened to me in my 39 years on this planet, Chris. I'd have to experience it to be able to deal with it, I guess. So I'd probably immediately sort of just being a Brit, we're slightly coy and cautious when it comes to naturism, embracing naturism. Let's say that's not something that us Brits are very, very good at. So I'd probably turn the other direction and go and pour myself a stiff.
Oh, Stephen, right, let's move on, son. Freudian
stiff drink. A stiff drink, Chris.
I
was sorry, hibiki, a double hibiki.
Yeah. Or did you say hibiki or a little peaky? Let's move on now. Now, on an uplifting subject, Sal,
Australia,
friends of ours. Okay, they got the Qatar cargo handling deal. So, well done, and to Hesham and the rest of the team there at Sal, congrats. Things are moving ahead there, doing a good job. So, well done, guys. Okay, so we'll add that one in. And then something that I think you will be interested in having a little viewpoint or a comment on is now that Australia...
No, not me, Chris.
Now that Australia is starting to open up and there's holiday hopes and there's, many people hoping to get back, my God, Steve, the prices that are coming up now are incredible. So this is...
Well, first of all, I must congratulate... the new New South Wales Premier on his I'd say conviction, Chris, which the previous bird, Gladys, the Sheila that was in the role now before this chap, had, she seemed very keen with her and her health minister, Brad Hazard. So I can tell I do take very good care. I mean, I'm not sure that most New South Wales residents will probably know the the names of these people, but Hazard and Berejiklian seem to want to keep New South Wales locked down for forever. They've now broken away from that. They're now reaching 80% vaccination rates. They are going to go alone for a little while, Chris, whilst the socialist communist states of Western Australia and Queensland remain locked down, and the comrade Andrews, who runs Victoria, will probably keep Victoria locked down for longer. They're back up at 4,000 or 5,000 cases a day this week, which is quite. Well, I'd say it's only alarming if you're in state and you're not vaccinated. The trick is to get a bloody jab in your arm. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Of course, we've had all of this backdrop of Qantas kind of pushing the restart message and getting international flying restart. So I think there's obviously been a fair deal of lobbying done, and that has resulted in the New South Wales government now saying that they will open to traffic from the 1st of November. That's not to everybody; it's to Australians, citizens, permanent residents, those that hold work visas 457s or whatever, and also the parents of Australian residents and citizens who might well be overseas or need to get out. So this is great news. The problem is, getting a seat for anything at a reasonable price is presenting a particular problem. It's cheap airfares are as unique right now in Australia as the Loch Ness monster is evasive in Scotland. Yeah. So it's pretty tough, I think. Now I suspect there'll be a bit of a reset as capacity goes back into the market, Chris. People work out how these quotas are managed, etc. Airlines will want to gauge the response from consumers now before they start putting new capacity in. So unfortunately, if you want to bag a seat, you don't have to book now and maybe pay $3,000 return to London in economy. Yeah. At the risk of Qantas, Qatar, Emirates putting in and announcing new flights in the next 2 or 3 weeks, which I suspect they will do based on how this goes into and out of Sydney, and therefore flights might well become available at a third or half of what you've paid for your seat. That is a risk that you will take if you want a seat. Buy it now and pay the price, because the capacity might not come back in as planned, and therefore you'll be up the creek without a paddle.
Yes, indeed, my friend. Yes, indeed. And my God, how things are changing, but they're changing fast, which is what
so it's great. So I've spoken to 2 or 3 Australian friends this morning already. I was on this like a rat up a drain pipe. The message was a little bit confused this morning because the federal government, of course, the Prime Minister ScoMo is responsible for the international border. Yeah. And the New South Wales Premier had announced that they were going to allow everybody to free flow back into the country. That's not the case. It's citizens and residents first, which I think is reasonable and fair. So I'll just have to hold my horses and bide my time until I'm back in Darlinghurst or Byron Bay or Rose Bay, with the real Bundaberg, with the real Bundy and Coke, although this is a Queensland drink, so I'm not really sure about that. I don't really like Queensland very much. Actually, Cape Tribulation is beautiful, as are many other places, but the Queenslanders are an interesting bunch. You'd fit in well with your wife beater on there, Chris, in Queensland. That is exactly what they would wear. To go. That's their best dress. Stephen, that's their best dress.
Stephen, you can't say things like that.
Why?
That's
what it's called in Australia. It's called a wife beater.
Oh my God! Oh my God Almighty! Oh my goodness me! This is just something to let the air and the sun get to you whilst you're working outside.
Okay, you could use the official term singlet. Singlet. You've got your singlet and thongs on, Chris.
Yes, my friend, but I won't be revealing. Right, my friend.
So anyway, that's it. Note, I'm looking forward to getting back to Oz. As you know, Oz is a special place for me. And
For me, I'm looking forward to getting to New Zealand.
Last time I was there with you, Chris, I don't remember very much.
Yes. It was, God, my God, Steve, the years have flown by, mate. Right, lovely boy. Let's wish everybody well now with the pressures that are coming up, positive pressures, but people need to be a little bit constrained now in how they address them so that they don't overflow and have a little bit of a flood that affects all of the consumers. So
An overflow and a flood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Along.
Gotta be
Some great analogies today.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Right, sir. Listen, lovely to speak to you as always. And until the next time, take care of yourself. And I hope to see you soon somewhere.